Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Rise Up, Ignite Your Life. And this is our first full-length interview episode of 2023. So I'm super excited to start this new year off with an amazing guest, Glen Williams, who is a retired officer, investigator, detective, and is now an author and program developer who is out teaching people real world applicable ways to overcome post-traumatic and occupational traumatic stress. Hey, Glenn, how's it going?
Great, Krista. Thank you for having me on.
I'm really excited to start this new year off right. So I wanted to get somebody on here who is making waves, making change, and creating an impact for real in the lives of first responders. So let's start our conversation off and just talk a little bit about what was your childhood like? Who were you as a little one?
Wow. I was the oldest, so I got to learn early, and my folks learned on me. I was an athlete, a student. I grew up in a small farm town, so pretty much everybody was an athlete at that point in time. But my father was a coach, a teacher, and I learned early, suck it up. We just learned then you're a guy, you can take care of this. You got this. You don't need anybody's help. And that's how I grew up. I grew up learning to work hard. You don't get anything in life without working hard is what I was told. And the harder you work, the better you will be. And that was how I grew up, and I wouldn't change it for the world. It was I would go back, and if I had to grow up again at that same time, I'd go back to my hometown. Things have changed a lot since then.
So did you have a military or first responder family?
My grandfather was in World War II, and that's about it. My other grandfather wanted to go, and they wouldn't let him because he ran a farm, and that was one of the exempt occupations, and he was bitter about that for the rest of his life. He wanted to go serve. So other than that, no, at the time. Then I did have a brother-in-law who served in the Army. He actually worked his way from private to general. And he was a great influence on me. And, then my kids two of my kids have served. One went to Iraq in the Army. She was a medic, and the other one went to Afghanistan. He was in the 82nd Airborne. Unfortunately, he got blown up over there. He lived. But that was an experience, over 3 years at Walter Reed, 40 plus surgeries so he could sort of walk again. He was only 20 at that time. But, there have been others in the past, yes. But most recently, that's about it.
So did you know what you wanted to be when you grew up?
Yeah, I wanted to be a veterinarian. And then I learned early in college physics and organic chemistry took it out of me, and I learned that I wasn't cut out to be a veterinarian.
Oh, no. So you always knew that it was a helping profession, but the math and the science weren't your friend.
Absolutely. That's what I learned. Then as I was working through life and raising a family, I started actually working for the post office, and I heard about the Postal Inspection Service, and I suddenly found out that's when I discovered that's what I really wanted to do. So I went back to school at night, finished my degree because I had to have a degree to qualify, and I took the testing, and I talked with the recruiter and asked her if having sugar diabetes, because I have type 1 diabetes, would be a problem. She said no. It took me 2 years to finish my degree, and when I got my degree, I did my application, and then they disqualified me because I have diabetes. And so I was kind of hung up. I didn't know what to do. I finally found out what I wanted to do with my life, and they wouldn't let me. So I was talking to a friend one night, and he says, "Hey, Sandy PD's hiring. Why don't you go apply there?" And he was the investigator for the DA's office. and he had worked with people out there. And so I went and applied. Uh, there were 3 openings, 500 plus applicants, and I was one of the ones that was hired. So that's how I began my career.
That's perfect. So how long did you serve as an officer?
26 years. I spent 20 years at Sandy PD, and then I retired from there at 20, and I went to work for the Utah Transit Authority Police for 6 years there, and that was a whole different world.
So you made it through what one would probably consider a full term career.
Yeah, at the time you could retire at 20 years, and so that was why I retired from Sandy PD, um, and that was considered there. So yeah, 26 years in total. I finally just got to the point where I said enough's enough, and I'm done. I had changed a lot of ways in my life at that time, and it was time to move on to something else.
And you did have some struggles with post-traumatic and occupational stress.
I did, and I didn't even realize it at the time. And that's, and like any normal officer, and that's the thing. I'm not some rock star. Um, I was never on any task force hunting serial killers or anything like that. I'm just an everyday street cop. I did spend 8 years in detectives, but during that time, I saw things. And the ones that rip you up are the worst ones are the kids. But I've basically broken it down. To me, and I'm not a doctor. Don't play one on TV or anything, but there's 3 types of trauma. You have experiential trauma, and those are things officers and firefighters and public safety professionals see every day. And then you have leadership trauma, and leaders can either create trauma or they can help you get through it. And then you have relationship trauma, and those are the relationships in our lives. Some of them, um, I guess, one other term for that would be toxic, and that could be a traumatic relationship. And between those 3, if you end up with 1, that's not good. You end up with 2, that's even worse. And if you end up with all 3, somewhere along the lines, that can tear you up. And mine was mostly experiential trauma. The worst ones are the kids. I had one experience where I came into roll call at 6 in the morning, and just as we're getting seated, got a call in my area of a missing child. And so we went and looked for this child, and I got there, and as I pulled in, it was kind of funny, weird that the fountain, some teenagers the night before had poured soap suds in the fountain in the courtyard of the apartment complex, and there was bubbles 10 feet out of that fountain and overflowing onto the street. It was like, oh man, what a mess. But we knew it'd dissipate, so we didn't pay much attention. Went down and looked for the kid, and the first thing you check is the home, because that's where 80% of them are found. And the parents called him Little Houdini. He was an escape artist. They'd actually put an extra lock on the door, and he still got out. We searched the complex, asked the questions: where does he like to go? Where's his favorite playground, et cetera, et cetera. Where do his friends live? And that he likes to be with. And so we searched the whole area for about 40 minutes. And then we gathered right by that fountain in the parking lot, trying to figure out. We didn't find him, obviously, and so we're looking and trying to figure out, okay, what's our next step? And as we're standing there, a little breeze came up and parted some of the soap suds, and we saw a foot in the water, and it was the child in the water. And I pulled him out. I did CPR on him. I got him over to the fire department. When they got there, they took him up to the primary children's hospital, and unfortunately he did not make it, and we got notified of that while we were still there. And I got really lucky. Not lucky that day for that reason, but I got lucky because I had a good leader that day. My lieutenant happened to be there, and he looked at me and he says, "Are you okay, brother?" And this is the first time. I was an officer 17 years at this point, and this is the first time anybody has ever checked to see if I was okay. And he says, "Are you okay, brother?" And I said, "No, I'm not." And he said, "Go take care of yourself. Don't worry about your report." And I went and sat in a church parking lot, backed up against a wall so nobody could come up on me. And I sat there and bawled my eyes out for about an hour. And he and I are actually still friends to this day. I've learned to be much more picky about who my friends are, and he's one of the good ones. But those are the ones that rip you up. Um, and I was angry. I was angry at the kids for putting soap in the fountain. I'm sure that's probably what attracted the young boy to the fountain, and I'm angry at myself for not even thinking about that. Um, and I was really angry for a long time, and then I was hurt because I couldn't save him. And even though I've taught first aid, CPR, I've done all that stuff. If you're doing CPR, they're already dead, and it's a miracle if you bring them back. And I know that, but it still doesn't hurt any less.
Right.
And those are some of the types of instances that hurt and that rip you up.
I commend you for being able to say out loud in that moment, "No, I'm not okay."
Yeah.
Because so often that's not what happens. Even if someone reaches out, so often people just brush it off and say, "I'm fine."
Oh yeah. And if
No,
somebody says I'm fine, you better re-question them because
yeah,
I don't know how many times in my career I had done that, and everybody else does because we got this. We don't need help.
yeah, so much. Yeah, some of the kids are still to this day, 20 years later, still the visions that I have, those moments. And it's not always necessarily the death or the incident itself. My challenge, the things that haunt me are it, more often than not the reactions of the family members.
Yeah.
It's that moment when mom is just screaming that scream that only can come from absolute desperation, and when they're looking at you to solve the problem and you can't,
Yeah.
those are the moments that I'm still struggling with letting go of. Not that we can't save them, not that the bad stuff doesn't happen, but just that moment of emotion that is so raw and so vulnerable, and not having any way to help that person either.
And
It's really difficult.
it is, and we force ourselves to hold it in. I mean, in that case, I held it in till I got the parents taken care of, and the family set up so that everybody was taken care of. And they were on the way to the hospital, and neighbors were helping out with their other kids, and we got it all worked out. And we just can't let go at that point because we have to be strong for them.
Right.
That's the way I looked at it. And I still look at it that way. We've got to be strong for them and help them through that. But in so many instances in the past, we forget then after that we've still got to take care of ourselves. And that's one thing I go around and I preach about now is if we're not okay, we can't help other people. And we
Right.
can't be the best we can be if we are not okay.
Well, I think we're talking right now about one of the biggest challenges of occupational stress. One of the biggest things that is difficult to fix for first responders. We have to be aware of our emotions. We have to be open to communicate and connect with others. And we have to be willing to talk about things and be open and feel the feelings. But we also have to be able to shut down when it's necessary. So we almost need to learn how to have a really functional on off switch that we use regularly, and there's no way around it. We can't just be emotional beings, and we can't just be non-emotional beings. We have to find a middle ground where we're able to function in both spheres equally effectively.
And that's actually one of the biggest problems that and I'm speaking specifically law enforcement, but I'm sure EMTs, fire, and everybody also has is we shut it off and we forget that we can turn it back on when we get home, and that we don't talk about it. I didn't talk to my first wife about stuff. I didn't want her to worry. There's things that happened that I almost got run down by a car who was charging me, and some of the fights that I was in and things like that. And I just didn't want her to worry, so I didn't say anything, and that just built a wall. And that led to, I mean, I was married 19 years, but after 19 years, it was done because I quit talking. And then I realized later that not only had I quit talking, that had led to her quitting also. And that's one of the things I'm really critical right now about, is that I really want to help and assist people with, is maintaining their relationships through these issues, because what we've been doing for all these years is not working and has not worked. And that's evidenced by the high divorce rate and the high
Right.
suicide rate. And so if we can just maintain some sort of communication, and that's one of the things I teach. When I went to the academy, it was kind of funny. They brought our spouse in for a 4-hour session, and they said, the divorce rate in law enforcement is extremely high. You're going to see things, though, that you're not going to want to talk about. They're going to be too horrific. And you're going to see things you can't talk about because it's an ongoing investigation. But keep that communication open with your spouse so you don't get divorced. And after 4 hours, we all walked out of there looking at each other going, and they never told us how. And it took me 25 years, but I finally came up with the how. And that's one of the things I am really critical on, is open, honest communication.
Right. So we can share with our significant others how we're feeling. We can
Mm-hmm.
share our emotional needs in the moment. We can say, I had a really hard day. Can you just sit with me? I had a really hard day. Can you just hold me?
And you
This
can,
case was, challenging for me. It's okay to say those things, even in the midst of things that we can't talk about. They shouldn't be asking for details. You don't want
right.
to be rehashing details,
Well,
but you
and you
can
can say, you can even share the experience, leaving out some of the details.
in a
But
general
I can tell you what I did. A kid came, running out the door and yelling for help. I went charging through the door with my weapon drawn to take down the bad guy. I took him down. I went and checked on the victim and worked through everything there, and everything's okay. I mean, that's a real brief description of one night where a guy tried to kill his wife, and she went over to her parents, and I sat out there all night in front of the house so he wouldn't come back. Well, he came back, but he snuck through backyards from 4 blocks away and crawled through a back window, and he shot his wife. And after the shot, after that occurred, a 12-year-old brother came running out, and I ended up going in and having to take the guy down. And unfortunately, that's another one that just bothers the hell out of me, because the family wouldn't let me stay in the house to protect her. I had to sit out in my car on the front street. And so all I could do was react. And, I know if I would have been in the house, probably would have been in a gunfight. That's okay. I was ready for that. But they weren't, but they felt they could protect her, because the guy was a gangbanger, the husband, and these guys were a gang family. And so they got this, but they didn't. And, so as we go through those things, I can rephrase that. And I can talk, I don't have to talk about how when I went in to check on her, I could see the bullet hole in her forehead and the blood trickling down her cheek. That's something I will never, ever forget. The fact that she had her 2-year-old son in her arms when he shot her, I will never forget. These are things that I don't have to share that part of it. But I can say, yeah, when I was going through that door, I was scared. I knew I was going to get in a gunfight. And they were fighting in the living room. And when I waded in and I tackled the guy, I realized who the bad guy was and threw him down and got him handcuffed. I was scared as hell because I couldn't find the gun. I knew there was a gun somewhere and I couldn't find it. And, the evidence guys later found it had been kicked underneath some floor-length drapes, and nobody knew where it was at. Thank goodness in that case. So those are things that they stick with you. But I can share that as, I went in, I was able to take the guy down, put him into custody. That's what I did. And then I went and checked on the victim, and I can leave it at that. But here's how I felt. I was scared. I was scared like crazy going through that door. I was disappointed in the outcome, and I was, the family blamed me for their daughter getting killed. And that hurt, because I know if they would let me in the house, it wouldn't have happened. And, that's just those things, how I felt, I can share, and just a little brief details, not the gory details.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't want to. There is secondary trauma. So, wives of first responders and husbands of first responders are vulnerable to actually getting post traumatic stress from hearing the stories in great detail. So, there has to be a balance there that we give our significant others the emotional connection that they need and that we need without without traumatizing them as well, but they're not as fragile as we always think they are. And every time we try to protect them from our reality, we're actually putting a nail in the coffin of our relationship
Yep.
because that protection, as you say, builds not only walls, but huge caverns that people can't cross. So,
And I've talked to spouses and they say, I know when he's holding back. And the mind it'll always tell you what you can't do. And the mind why things won't work. And so their mind automatically goes to, okay, the worst place it can go. He won't talk to me. What's going on? I know there's something wrong. Is he having an affair? Is he doing
right.
this? Is he doing this? And the mind automatically goes to those places. And then that creates discord and that creates distrust. And then you wonder why the relationships fall apart. And it's really not anybody doing anything wrong. It's just kind of the way it is. And by holding that communication back, that's where it goes.
Yeah, communication and community are probably the most important pieces of this puzzle, creating those connections with others who can actually support us in a way that is desirable. Because we don't want a stranger reaching out and saying, "Hey, how you doing?" just because they read some kind of t-shirt that said, "Oh, do a buddy check." No, we want actual legitimate buddy checks. We want our people who know what we're going through and have the same stories to say, "Hey, are you okay today?"
Yeah.
Because we can have a conversation about not really so much today, how about you? And we can go back and forth and we both know it's easier to talk about when someone else is hurting too than it is to talk to someone who has no idea what the heck, like, they don't know the weight that we're carrying. So those connections with peers are crucial.
Absolutely. I know back in that day, we did not have peer support, and I'm excited to see the peer support groups that are coming out. And it is critical that we talk with somebody that actually not just is going through the motions, but cares. And that's what you call a relationship when you have two people that actually care about each other, and that doesn't have to be a marriage or that type of relationship. A relationship's a relationship. Say I have a couple of buddies that I talk to a lot about stuff, and they talk to me, and we've known each other for 25 years, and they've been in law enforcement, and those are the people that we actually that I actually connect with. There are others that I've been in law enforcement with. I wouldn't talk to them for anything because I don't have that connection, and I'm not sure they really care.
Absolutely. So you are on a mission to bring awareness and, as you say, to bridge the gap. Tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about your mission, your journey, and your process.
Um, I just developed PTSD. When I got divorced the first time, my wife actually told me that I can't divorce her because she has cancer. Well, I kind of gone, no, you don't. I mean, that's something you'd think they would share with you earlier. Well, that kind of was proof about how bad our relationship was at that point because she did have cancer. So kind of hung on to things so that she had insurance and things like that for a while. Um, and I don't want other people doing the same things. If I can help one person today not do the same stupid things that I did, and they save a relationship, then I still win. And that's my whole goal in life right now is to help others. One of the things I discovered is we put ourselves in this tiny little box in law enforcement, in public safety. We've got policies, procedures, this. And if you look outside that box and you get outside that box, um, most people are afraid to because they get in trouble. What I discovered in my healing process is some of the things outside the box actually work better than some of the things inside the box. I don't like meds. I'm deathly afraid of them. I mean, I had rotator cuff surgery and I took one oxycodone, and that was probably the most painful surgery I ever had. But I took one and I didn't like the way it made me feel, and the rest got flushed down the toilet. And because I just don't like that. I've had friends get addicted from it. So what I found out is as I try other things outside, even for that, or healing the PTSD. For example, Tibetan bowls. There are these metal bowls made in Tibet, and they put off a tone, and the sound will. You can actually go into kind of a trance with it. Meditation is amazing. I do meditation several times a week, and depending on how I feel and what things, but that's part of being in tune with who I am and my body. And just like back in the day, drum circle, that would have been a bunch of hippies and dopers around a fire beating on their drums. Well, there's actually shaman led drum circles for healing. And just like the Tibetan bowls, the sounds and the vibrations create a healing process. And I mean, there's no way in heck 25 years ago I would have ever gone to one. But now I go occasionally as I feel the need, and it recharges me. And again, there's a healing process as we go through things. There's so many things out there that are not Western medicine per se that actually work. And that's one of the other messages I have is get outside the box. Let's start thinking in a broader view. And I think that will actually, as we heal our family, community is two or more people with a common goal or cause. Our family is the most important community to us, is what everybody tells me. And I always ask them, okay, if that's the most important community, then why is the divorce rate so high? And why is the suicide rate so high? And they have no answer to that because they don't know. So as we open up and allow that communication to come through, that's one of the keys, as you mentioned earlier, communication to saving that community. And if we have a good family community, then that will ripple out to our work community, and then that'll ripple out to our community at large, and things will get better all the way through the whole process. And that's kind of the ultimate goal, is to create that ripple process by having great family communities and then rippling that out into our communities at large and improving those relationships.
So you have created a book.
Yeah, I have. Yes. It's called Bridging the Gap. Oops. Got one here. Bridging the Gap, an inside look at communication and relationships after traumatic events. And I share a lot of the experiences I had that created trauma. I talk about how I didn't deal with it back then, and then how I would do things differently now. And then I was blessed to have an opportunity I met a lady that I have zero secrets from her. She knows everything that's ever happened to me, everything that's ever bothered me, and we have open, honest communication about everything. And because of that, we have a great relationship. My kids, I've repaired my relationships with them because being an officer, I missed a lot of things. I put the job first. Big mistake. It's a job. It's not my life, but I let it become my life. And that's another message that I have to share, is it's not your life. You get to go make a difference, but it's just a job. And that's easily seen by people are easily replaced. You walk out the door and you're replaced the next day. And nobody really cares, whether it's me or whether it's another officer. They don't care. And we all do the same job, maybe not quite the same way. So again, that's another message, is let's get outside the box and start thinking a bit along the lines of what our communities want. Starting with our families, because that's the most important one to us.
So you briefly touched on identity, and identity is another huge piece of
Mhm.
this situation. In our offices, I have never asked a single police officer who they are and not gotten "I'm an officer" as the first answer. They
Yeah,
are identifying their whole being around their job,
yeah,
and what we're always looking for is, um, I'm a spiritual person. I'm a man of God. I'm a whatever. I focus on integrity. I'm committed to environmental something. Whatever it is that you're actually willing to die for. Those are the things that we should hear. When I say, "Who are you?" It should be this rich answer of the roles you play in life, father, husband, all of that, but it should also include those morals and values that you hold dear. And like almost always the answer is, what? I'm a police officer. And it's challenging to get deeper than that. Sometimes they don't even have answers when we go to those next layers. What values would you fight for? I don't know. We'll get a lot of I don't know. I've never really thought about it. How can you
That's
not think
funny.
about those things that are
Yeah.
so important to you?
Yeah. I spent 3 years after my second divorce. I spent 3 years up in my cabin by myself, rediscovering me. And when you ask that question, who are you? I have a new answer, because you're right. It used to be I'm an officer and I'm a police officer. That's who I am. And my new answer was I'm a spiritual, healing, loving spirit being of light. But I also added a mission statement: as a spiritual, healing, loving spirit being of light, my purpose on earth is passion, honor, and love. Therefore, I create celebration and abundance and peace as I spread light throughout the world. And I see the teaching is spreading my light throughout the world.
See, that's an answer to who I am. That's a healthy, well-rounded, under introspective answer. And that's what we want to create for everyone.
Yeah.
That ability to go, who am I really? Not what's my label, what's the job or the role that I play, but who am I on a fundamental level?
But be careful. That's outside the box, which is what we've got to be.
It is, it is. I always say that I'm a little bit, I'm very science-based. All of the programs at Battle to Be are based on neuroscience, trauma research, years and years of numbers and statistics and things we can validate. But also, the fact is, some of the most effective therapies are Eastern therapies that are based in spirituality. When you say, talk about the healing bowls, that resonates at a harmonic pitch that calms your nervous system. So if you want science, you have to be able to look at what is your nervous system doing in reaction to these things. And our nervous systems respond really well to woo-woo type things. So one cannot negate the power of outside of the box if one goes deep enough into the science of what's happening with post-traumatic stress. You can't have one without the other. It's impossible.
No, you can't. It's amazing. What's funny is actually getting outside the box. I used to have nightmares 3, 4 times a month, and now once, twice a year, maybe. And so things are shifting, and it's an ongoing healing process. It's not all of a sudden you're healed, you're done, but it's an ongoing process. And as we fall back, if we fall back on going back to what we used to do, it comes back. Um, Whereas if we keep moving forward, and that's one of the big keys, and I talk about, for guys that retire, they have to have a purpose. They've got to have a purpose. You hear the guys, "Oh, I'm going to go fishing." Uh, yeah, you'll do that for about 3 months, and then you're going to be bored. And that's the other thing. And that's why I have my purpose now. I'm writing a couple more books. I discovered I actually write fairly well, and I enjoy it. And the main purpose is to go out and teach and help others. Again, not do the same stupid stuff that I did, but change things so that they have a better life.
So you're available to go to speak to organizations and events.
Yes, I have an 8-hour course that I teach mostly to police departments, but everybody in life has trauma, so it's applicable to anybody. They just have to listen to my cop stories. And then I have a 4-hour seminar that I do for conventions and conferences. And then I also have a keynote where I talk about communication relationships heavily in that because that's so key to anything we do in life.
Perfect. So if people want to reach out to you, how would they do that?
www.gdubauthor.com. That's my website. And then they can get my book on Amazon or Barnes and Noble. And I do a lot of book signings at Barnes and Noble around the country. So that's always fun because I get to meet some really great people.
Book signings are awesome. So you're also working on a new project.
Yes, we're putting together a documentary about how the trauma that officers experience affects their families, that vicarious trauma that you were talking about, and how the behaviors that we are doing don't work so well and negatively affect our families. And so we'll be coming up with some solutions. Somehow, I don't know how, but they've considered me to be somewhat of an expert now. And so I get to do some commentary on things that will positively affect the issues, and point out some of the negative things and how we can change those. But it'll have real officers from throughout the country who have gone through some horrific events and the effects that those have had on their families. So that, in fact, we're raising money right now for, oops, I just lost it, for the fundraising on the to get the film done. And if you go to Heroes and Families United, you can look that up on the website. And if you donate there, any funds will go to the production of the documentary. And that's the process we're in right now. And then secondary, I'm working on a script for my book. I've been told it needs to be a feature film. And so I'm working on that with a script writer right now too. So those are the things that are ongoing.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And before we close, is there any last words you have for our audience?
Don't be afraid to let your feelings show. Be open, honest, authentic, and that will improve your relationships. Develop it so that you don't have to hold anything back. I'm grateful for my wife. Who knows everything about me, and every thought that comes, she reads it on my face before I say it. But that's how open I am now, and I'm grateful for that opportunity.
Find those beautiful connections. Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Glenn, for being here with us today.
Thank you, Kristen. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us for Rise Up, Ignite Your Life this first week of December 2023.